friends, and welcome to another episode of Chapters. I'm your host, Carter Seaton, and it's great to have you with us. And today we really have a good treat for you. We have Homer Hickam, the award-winning author and West Virginia's own Rocket Boy. We're delighted to have him. Homer is the author of many books, including the acclaimed memoir Rocket Boys, which was adapted into the film October Sky. His awards for writing are many and include the University of Alabama's Clarence Cason Award and Shepherd University here in West Virginia's Appalachian Heritage Author Award. He was raised in the coal fields of West Virginia and graduated from Virginia Tech. He's also a Vietnam veteran, a scuba diver, scuba instructor as well, a retired NASA engineer, an amateur paleontologist who discovered numerous dinosaurs, serves on the boards of the United States Space and Rocket Center, which is the space camp in Huntsville, Alabama, where he lives, and the Museum of the Rockies. And he was appointed in 2019 as an advisor to the National Space Council. He also volunteers for feral cat rescue programs. He and his wife share their time between homes in Alabama and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Welcome to Chapters, Homer. It's wonderful to have you.
Well, thank you, Carter. Thank you for having me. And hopefully we won't hear too much out of those feral cats. We have, we're foster failures, so we actually have 6 cats in this house.
Oh,
and
wow.
At any time, there's one of them that wants to make himself known. So we'll see if we can get through this without hearing from him.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, today we're going to mostly talk about your book, the new book, Don't Blow Yourself Up. But first, I want to find out what spurred you to become a writer. Is that something you've always wanted to do, or did it happen after you gave in and wrote Rocket Boys?
No, if it hadn't been for Sputnik, which really got me interested in the space business, I would have probably ended up being an English professor at some Midwestern university. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That was really my strong suit, was right from the get-go. In the 3rd grade, our teacher asked us to write a short story. And the one I wrote, she liked it so well that she actually had it mimeographed and spread all around the school. And I still remember that story. It was a story about the Roman Republic and battle on the bridge, about a boy observing that. And so she said, you know, Sonny, as I was called back then, I think someday you could make your living as a writer. And I thought to myself, why wait? I could use the money now. So I actually started my own little newspaper there in Colwood, and it was fairly popular. I wrote one story about this lady falling down the creek, and it was really funny, and everybody got a big kick out of it, except that lady was my mom, and she took away my First Amendment rights. So I had to cancel. I had to close down my newspaper, but I wrote. I had a column in the newspaper at Virginia Tech when I was there. And when I came back from Vietnam, what I really missed and what I needed was some passion in my life. And scuba diving and scuba instruction filled part of that. And the other part was writing. And so I started writing and researching. I sold a lot of articles to scuba diving magazines like Skin Diver and Sport Diver and so on. And then I also started writing about shipwrecks. And that ultimately led me to diving and working on the U-boat wrecks off North Carolina that were just being found in the early 1970s. And that led me to write my first book called Torpedo Junction, which came out in 1989. It was a military history bestseller. And so I was really known for writing that type of nonfiction book long before I got around to writing Rocket Boys. And by the way, while I was writing Torpedo Junction, I had a writer, or a so-called writer up in Maryland, an insurance broker, who kept calling me and writing me and asking me about submarines. And I tried to help him out a little bit. And we had quite a few conversations, although I didn't think that he had any chance of ever being published. And his name, by the way, was Tom Clancy. So
yeah, so much.
Tom and I had actually the same publisher, Naval Institute Press, for our first books.
All right. So after you wrote Rocket Boys, you got called all of a sudden by movie producers who said this needs to be a movie. That must have been a really heady experience.
Well, it was actually even before I wrote the memoir. I'd written a short article for Smithsonian Air and Space. I was working for NASA at the time, but also, and Torpedo Junction had come out. I was really busy with NASA. I didn't have time to write a book, I didn't think. So I was writing a number of short articles for different magazines, and one of them was Smithsonian Air and Space magazine. And I was called by the editor, Pat Trenner, one night in December of '94, who asked me for 2,000 words on anything. She needed it like overnight for a filler in the magazine. And I looked across on my desk and I saw this old rocket motor from my Colwood days that I was using for a paperweight. And I don't know, something just clicked in my head. And I said, well, Pat, I could write you 2,000 words on when I was a boy in West Virginia and I built rockets. And she was completely, totally, utterly underwhelmed with this idea, but I did it anyway. And as I wrote it, a lot of the things that I'd forgotten about, believe me, I had not dwelled on this story. So many other things that happened in my life, but a lot of things started coming out in my mind. I remembered Miss Riley, of course, the other Rocket Boys, my dad, and my mom, and their attitude. But anyway, when the article came out a couple of months later, I started getting calls from Hollywood producers just based on the article, and they were small ones, small independent producers, but there was an interest out there. And then New York publishers started to call as well, saying, we've read this, are you going to write a book about it? Because memoirs were starting to get really popular then. And I said, well, I guess I am now. I had no idea how difficult it would be to write this memoir. I had many false starts on it. And finally, I determined that the only way this story could be told was that the boy himself, Sonny Hickam, 14 through 17-year-old, Sonny Hickam would have to tell the story, which meant that I would have to peel away everything in my mind, everything that had happened since in college, Vietnam, scuba, the other writing, all this, NASA, all this, and let Sonny tell the story. And I like to say I got $1 million worth of psychotherapy writing that book that I didn't know I needed. And that's why I think that this book is successful. That's really Sonny telling his story, stripped away everything that happened to me after that. And that's why I finally got around to writing Don't Blow Yourself Up, because that's me. That's what happened after the Rocket Boys era.
Yeah. That's a fascinating story. And you're right, memoir did start to take off then. And I think it's still very popular. And
it is. Angela's Ashes was the first really big memoir, Frank McCourt. And but they're popular. Amazon has a nice assortment. You can go and find, a list of all the new memoirs, old memoirs, and all that. But booksellers typically don't give them much respect. They get spread all over the store. I saw one time Angela's Ashes when I was on book tour. It was sorted out under Irish American studies. And I said, why don't you just take these books out on the sidewalk and burn them? Because nobody can find them. Wow. And Rocket Boys often ends up either in space books, which is not, science books, which is not, or under Appalachian studies. So I really do think that they need a section in the bookstore that's just for memoirs, because people like memoirs, but they have trouble finding them on the shelf.
I understand. Let's go back to when you left Colwood and went off to college. The way you wrote this book is so engaging, but it's so funny in places. And part of it is your ability to sort of poke fun at yourself, and particularly when you were at Virginia Tech. I keep saying Georgia Tech. I'm sorry, my brother went.
That's all right. I hear it's a fairly good school too.
I've heard that. Yeah. He went on to work for Coca-Cola, so I guess he didn't do badly.
It has its moments.
Yeah. Okay. So Virginia Tech. Tell us about your time there and what that chapter in the book is primarily about.
Yeah, it was kind of fun to write that because I was able to start it in Colwood. Actually, the book starts that afternoon after the final scene in Rocket Boys and also the movie October Sky, where the town and my dad turn out to see our last rocket launch. So After that was over, I go back to my room, and all the other boys have gone somewhere else. My dad went back to the mine. My mom's down in the kitchen painting her picture of Myrtle Beach on the wall like she did. And it's like, now what do I do? And I realized that I had not applied to go to college. And except for the Air Force Academy, but I was turned down for that because of my eyes. And so it turned out that my mom had actually applied for me already to go to Virginia Tech. My brother was down there on a football scholarship, and she had heard that Virginia Tech had a good engineering school. It was also a lot closer than any other university to Coalwood. Virginia Tech was just across the border down in Blacksburg, Virginia, where Morgantown was at that time a 2-day drive away. You had to overnight around Elkins. To get it. We couldn't figure out why they put WVU up in Pennsylvania. Why was it that far north? But anyway, and of course, we loved West Virginia and Jerry West and all that. But nonetheless, I ended up at Virginia Tech, and Virginia Tech at that time was a military college. Mm-hmm. Completely. So that surprised me. I didn't realize I was going essentially to West Point of the South there, with a little bit of Georgia Tech and MIT thrown in on top of it. So it was a tough school. But I did learn how to be a good cadet after a while. And that story is a little bit about the harassment that we got as rats down there, and learning how to work the system, and which I did. And then a good part of the segment on Virginia Tech is where I built this giant cannon using kind of Rocket Boy's approach and technology to it. And one of the reasons I hadn't told that story too much is because it sounds a lot like the Rocket Boy story. There's 4 boys, 4 cadets who get in their head, they're going to build this giant cannon, and everybody's against them, and including the school administration. And the reason that we did it was because we played Virginia Military Institute every Thanksgiving. They dragged out their little cannon. It was called Little John, and they would fire it, and they would chant across the field, "Where is your cannon? Where is your cannon?" And so through a lot of work and circumstances, including my dad bringing brass down from the coal mine to help us fill the amount of brass that we needed. We built this giant cannon, and it was first fired at the Virginia annual Thanksgiving Day game, Virginia Tech VMI. And when it went off, the explosion was so huge that the shockwave actually cracked the glass on the other side of the field in the press box. And but our cadet corps started chanting, "Here's our cannon, here's our cannon." So yeah, there are a lot of funny moments in that story about Virginia Tech.
Right. The stories that you tell about Vietnam, was that, and that obviously for everybody who was there was a tough time, but was that difficult for you to remember and recreate?
I thought it would be, but it didn't turn out to be too bad. For one thing, I had a purpose in including that part, and it's a fairly large segment of the book, and that was to kind of tell the story a little bit different from anybody that had ever done it. So I really got involved with how am I going to tell this story and make it more personal, and also just get you to feel the complete disorganization of that mess over there, as versus, a lot of the books you read, it's like, okay, everybody knows what they're doing. It's awful, yes, and terrible and all that. We all know what we're doing. In fact, my take on the entire war over there and the organization was that nobody knew what they were doing. It was a mess. And but I learned pretty quickly how to having grown up in Coalwood and sneaking around as a rocket boy, and then at Virginia Tech and sneaking around as a cannon boy. I learned pretty quick how to work the system over in Vietnam, and saw some pretty awful stuff. But at the same time, I learned an awful lot. I was able to get most of my guys through. It was an amazing year, and it was my pleasure to bring back to life a lot of the a lot of the guys that I knew and worked with over there, and I've heard from a few of them, and they loved the way that I wrote about it. And
That's
so,
good.
and there are a few, like all war stories. Ultimately, there's the potential for some humor, even in the worst situations. And so, I hope I bring out a little bit of that in that part.
It's obvious from your book that you really love to travel. Is there some place that you have loved the most? Someplace you wish you could continue to go back to on a regular basis?
Well, of course, we love the Virgin Islands. We have a home down there. I do write about going down to Honduras, Guanaja, the island of Guanaja, that I spent an awful lot of time. I went back and forth down there for 20 some years. Circumstances got me away from down there. Like there's hurricanes in the Caribbean, and just as Rocket Boys came out, an awful hurricane hit Honduras, and so it was really out of commission for several years, and I was involved with other things, so I've not been able to get back down there, and I don't know that I ever will. We love Italy. We love traveling all over Italy, and that's always a brilliant thing to do. But you're right. We just love to travel when we can, and I've never been any place that I didn't like, honestly. I mean,
adventure.
Well, I mean, like any travel, there are circumstances where things aren't working, your luggage is lost, and the bus isn't on time, or you don't get your rental car or whatever. But that's just part of travel. Yeah. And so you have to just take a step back and just say, okay, I'm in a different country. They have a different way of doing things, and I've generally, no matter where I am, for some reason I'm accepted. I don't know why, but I think it's true of most West Virginians. We go overseas, and we fill the ranks of the military. A lot of West Virginians in the military, so we're actually pretty well traveled, and we're just accepting of everyone and their cultures, and that's just the way we are.
Right. When you started scuba diving, was it pleasure diving?
Well, it was in a way. And like I said, when I came back from Vietnam, there was kind of some big holes in my life. And I guess I did have a little bit of what they call PTSD, but it was just primarily being in a combat zone for a year. You're completely, totally, utterly engaged with what is going on and alert. And so your mind is working, at 1,000%. Then you come back to the States, and all of a sudden it's just nothing. There's this big vacuum, really. And so I was looking for something to fill that, and scuba diving really helped in that regard. I learned poorly down in Puerto Rico. I was taught by a couple of drunken ensigns, Navy ensigns that I write about in the book. But when I came to Huntsville, I fell in with a fellow that was sort of an astronaut. He was in the Air Force, where they went up really high in these balloons called Man High. His name was Cliff McClure. And I learned how to be a diver with Cliff. And also he was an adventurer. And so he got me going, traveling with my diving and writing about it. So diving gave me an opportunity to write. And then I got into instruction. I taught for Cliff. And then that ultimately led into diving the U-boats off North Carolina. So I would say it was a bit recreational, but I would say mostly work. And I also worked, I took that diving into NASA, where I worked at the Neutral Buoyancy Simulator here in Huntsville at Marshall Space Flight Center, and helped train the astronauts that deployed the Hubble Space Telescope, and then went up and repaired it. And I also worked inside the suit quite a lot underwater. So it really added to my life. It made my life a lot more colorful and a lot more interesting, I should say.
Yeah. Revolve around a scuba diver.
I haven't for several reasons. I did write Torpedo Junction, which was based upon a lot of research, but also the dives that I made on the U-boats. But it was not about me. It was about the battle along the East Coast during World War II. And I did write all these articles about diving and traveling, scuba travel, and all that kind of thing. But I haven't written a book that's exclusively about scuba diving. Don't Blow Yourself Up has a big percentage of it about some of the diving adventures and so on. So that's as close as I've got. I've been asked to write another memoir, and I guess that's probably going to get more into my dinosaur hunting than anything. But we'll see.
Tell us how you got into that.
That came through the movie October Sky. Joe Johnston was the director of October Sky, interesting fellow. Came out of Texas and then went to Southern Cal to the film school there. Kind of fell under the mentorship of George Lucas, and ultimately ended up being the director of October Sky. And then he was also tapped to direct Jurassic Park 3. And I was out at his house after Rocket Boys came out, and he was already doing location scouting for Jurassic Park 3 up in Montana, which is where one of the best places to find dinosaurs is there. And I asked him if I could go with him on location when his scouting, and he said, no, Homer, you can't do that. We're too busy. Can't mess with you. But I did it anyway. I tagged along and met a fellow by the name of John Jack Horner, Dr. Horner, at Montana State University, who was the advisor on the first 3 or 4 Jurassic Park movies. And he's a fellow very famous in paleontology, and we got to be friends. And so for the next 20 plus years, I've gone out every summer and hunted dinosaurs, and mostly turned over my finds to Jack or at Montana State or the Museum of the Rockies. That's why I'm on the board there. But we're also working with University of Washington and University of California in Berkeley and several others. So that's how I got into it.
Wow, that's exciting.
But I can tell you, West Virginia boys and girls can tell the difference between rocks and bones. So we're pretty good right off the bat.
So of all of these things that you've done that you talk about in Don't Blow Yourself Up, what are you the most proud of?
Oh, I don't know. Pride is a West Virginia sin. I'm not proud of anything.
Okay, all right, I'll drop that question.
There's a double meaning to don't blow yourself up. I mean, if you're a West Virginian, you do not get puffed up. So I'm not going to take credit for being proud of anything. I just have lived my life as best I can.
Yeah, I understand. Tell me about carrying Albert home.
Oh, I loved writing Carrying Albert Home, and it's actually been, I think, the second most successful of my books.
Really?
Rocket Boys, you can't stop Rocket Boys. It just sells and sells and sells and sells, and it's still in hardcover after, let's see, it came out in '98, so 24 years. That's just unheard of to have a book that's still in hardcover after all those years. But Carrying Albert Home, I had been kind of carrying that story in the back of my head for a very, very long time. And but all of a sudden, I'd written a series of science fiction novels. It did pretty well. Crater, Crescent, and Crater True Blood, and the Lunar Rescue Company. I wrote that for HarperCollins. And because they wanted a young adult trilogy, and I don't read science fiction very much, so I had to be convinced to do it. But I enjoyed it once I did it. But anyway, and they've sold very, very well. But after that, I was kind of casting around for something that I really, really wanted to do, and I remembered the alligator story of my mom getting an alligator as a wedding gift from Buddy Ebsen, Uncle Jed and the Beverly Hillbillies, they were boyfriend and girlfriend down in Florida when my mom went down there. And anyway, I had heard over the years this family story about she and my dad carrying Albert home. After Albert got so big, he chased my dad out in the yard, and my dad started yelling, Elsie, it's either me or this alligator. And I like to say, after a few days of thinking it over, Mom said, okay, we'll let Albert go, but we got to carry him home. And so the adventures that they had, and they were outlandish adventures, and I heard them over, while growing up. And all this happened before I was born. I realized that here was a unique story. It really was unique. And it was
Yes.
also a way for me to go back. I love historical fiction. It was a way for me to go back and capture the Depression era, the 1930s, and also dig in what my parents must have been like back during, long before my brother and I were born. And we knew a lot of the tensions that went on between them. And it always seemed to be alleviated because my mom didn't like living in Coalwood. She wanted to go live in Myrtle Beach or anywhere other than Coalwood. And my dad loved Coalwood. He adored Coalwood. He was Coalwood. He couldn't really survive long without it. And so they had this constant tension growing up, but it always seemed to be alleviated by my mom and dad sitting down and talking about that time when they carried Albert home. So I knew there was a great story there and a great love story. And I really, really enjoyed telling it. And then HarperCollins brought it out.
When you are writing, do you have a specific routine?
Well, one thing I do when I start writing, first thing I don't do is read John Steinbeck, because if I read John Steinbeck, I end up writing bad Steinbeck. We have similar styles, and so and Steinbeck figures in carrying Albert home. My parents met Steinbeck out on the road, so that's something that I don't do, but I do love his writing, and I've probably been influenced by it quite a bit. So no, I just when I finally get it in my head and I settle down, okay, this is the book that I'm going to write, then that becomes my total focus. And I will write it straight through. I will tend to double back and work on the first chapter, but for the most part, I just write it straight through with the confidence. Now, let's see, the next one would be my 20th book. So I have the confidence now that I can go back and fix it. If my writing is not working, I go ahead and write anyway, because if there's any magic that's going to come out in my work, it's going to be in the rewrite. And I recognize that. So, and I think it's true for most writers. You have to let it cool and you go back and you rewrite. And you also have to write these days for the 21st century writer or reader. And the 21st century reader doesn't like a lot of what Steinbeck called hoop-de-doodle, and that is a lot of descriptive and colorful phrases and so on. They want to get to the meat of the story, just like television has trained them to do.
Right.
And so you just have to recognize
30 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, you have to recognize that. That's just it. And so I a lot of times I'll be writing and I'm just so happy with my writing. Oh my gosh, I'm really having a great day. And there's a little voice in the back of my head saying, you do know you're going to throw this away. But the cool thing about computers is you actually never do throw anything away. It's still there. And I remember stuff, and I've gone back and gotten stuff that it didn't work for this book, but would work for another one. So,
right.
So that's a good thing about computers.
Right. Well, it's been so good to have you today. I thank you so much for coming, Homer Hickam, and I know you all will want to rush out and buy his newest book, Don't Blow Yourself Up, his mother's warning to him on more than one occasion. This is Carter Seaton saying, have a great day and be back again soon. Bye-bye.
Connect with Chapters through email. Write to lp4@zoominternet.net. Chapters has a Facebook page at Armstrong Chapters. Like, subscribe, share, and comment. All Chapters episodes are available on YouTube. Visit the Armstrong Neighborhood channel on YouTube and look for a playlist of all the Chapters programs.